Good morning and welcome to the SEC Daily. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Gavin Schoenwald. All kinds of furious scrambling behind the scenes to make this thing go off today. We had a
We're here.
starving man on the other end of the camera. Had to get him some protein. We had to
right.
rearrange helmets 3 or 4 times. Camera checks, man. The stuff we go through to bring you guys content. You have no idea.
You guys don't even know that Chris was getting a full lift in right before the show.
That's right.
on camera. So we're here through all the turmoil, but baby, this is my favorite part of the day. So let's get right into it.
That's right. We got in some workouts just before the show to be ready. So
that's it.
All right, today's show, Gavin's astonishingly accurate bold predictions. They've been astonishingly accurate so far, so we're going to get into those. They are bold predictions.
Thank you.
They are bold for a reason. They're not necessarily supposed to be accurate, although again, the accuracy level of these has been uncanny so far. So we'll see if Gavin's on to something, as I will poke holes in all his logic as I usually do, and then he'll get the last laugh. That's how these things usually go. But looking forward to it. Our show presented by Bet Online. The last of the major pro sports leagues is off and rolling. College basketball is here as well. Bet Online remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL, all are in full swing. Bet Online is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. All the hoops betting action along with every sport available at your fingertips, both desktop and mobile access anytime. Head to Bet Online today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That is BLEAV for your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. Gavin, we got a bunch of SEC games this week, and I think we got SEC on SEC only action. Don't get those a ton, but we get them several weekends, more frequently after September. So we've got those this weekend, looking forward to that. Georgia and Ole Miss will be your biggest game. We'll probably get into a little bit more on that. We went over playoff stuff the last couple of days. If you missed those episodes, you can find those. But let's get into the action this weekend. We're going to do a bold prediction for each game, and let me pull yours up.
Yep.
But what's your of your best bold projections so far? What is the one that you're the most proud of hitting?
Probably that one. I believe the first week we did this was week 9, Chris, which I wish we did earlier. Look, have I been perfect? No, but I've definitely surprised myself with a couple of them. The one I'm probably most proud of was when Kentucky's passing game all of a sudden turned into Chip Kelly and the Oregon Ducks, and with Leary throwing for 370 after it being inconsistent. And I said they're going to come out, and you couldn't believe that. You were like, it hasn't happened all year. And sure enough, my man goes out and throws for 370. Who were they playing that week, Chris? Who was that?
Tennessee.
Yeah, that's right. Playing Tennessee, and he throws for 370, and they lost. They still lost. And so, I've hit on some. Have I been perfect? Absolutely not. But just trying to pull from as much wisdom as I can from my days as a player in this conference of some things that may happen. Like I said, they're bold predictions, so they're not probable, but they are very, very possible. And we've definitely seen some crazier things than what I'm about to rattle off here. So I'm excited to share those today.
All right, let's see what we can speak into existence today. Now, these are in order that you gave them to me. Yep. I don't know if there's any significance there. If you feel like the bolder ones are first,
just random.
Okay. Would you like me to do these in order of kickoff and just let you go?
That's great.
Okay.
That's great. Whatever one you want.
All right, let's do this. Let's start here. Vanderbilt and South Carolina kickoff in Columbia, 11 Central on the SEC Network. Gamecocks about 14-point favorites. That's a couple days old. I don't know what it is now. But boy, we may start with the boldest of predictions here, Gavin, for this one. Maybe a little of your heart in it, for full disclosure.
It is.
But to be clear, this is a scenario that played out this time last year in kind of a different way that nobody would have predicted, and it came true. So now that I have teased your bold prediction for Vanderbilt, South Carolina, what is your bold prediction?
Man, you You just Kobe'd me and alley-oop, and I'm Shaq about to dunk this thing, Chris. This is going to be an old school football game. I'm telling y'all right now. You had the home game last week at South Carolina against Jacksonville State. You won, but really almost lost it. Not a great performance. Now you got Vandy coming into town. I'd be at 11 a.m. kick. I'd be surprised if this was even a great crowd, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be very minimal. There's not a lot of momentum from either of the programs. Not really an intriguing game when you look at the schedule. It's going to be an old school game, low scoring. Vandy, I feel like, always plays South Carolina well, but South Carolina, especially of recent history, has had Vandy's number. I mean, Vandy's beaten teams like Florida, Georgia, multiple times since the last time they beat South Carolina. They've definitely had their number. But that all changes this weekend in Columbia, South Carolina. 21-20. Vanderbilt finds a way. They had a few SEC wins late in the year last year against Florida and Kentucky on the road, and they find a way to do it here. And then the talk really heats up about Shane Beamer, about what's going on. How could they drop so far off after what they did last year? But yeah, going to be an old school game. Low scoring, maybe not a ton of yards, but I got Vandy winning the game by 1 point.
Okay, I'm going to give you where I think you could be right and where you could be wrong on these, okay? Where you could be right. Vanderbilt in this scenario last year, it had lost several games in a row. It had gotten demoralized. It had gotten beaten down pretty badly. And then Vandy goes and beats
Chris,
Kentucky
you're talking about me and my team. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
The self-awareness was a little lacking there.
That's all right. That's all right.
Gavin was playing for the Commodores this time a year ago. But yes, it was a hard season for you guys until that point. And then you guys found a little something late. You went with it, and you beat not one, but I thought more impressively was beating Florida the week after you beat Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because that kind of said, all right, these guys can play if you don't show up. Mm-hmm. Look, absolutely. Vanderbilt at this point has lost 8 straight. Season goals gone by, but South Carolina was a team that, hey, these guys thought they were going to be finishing second or third in the East.
That's right.
They beat Clemson, beat Tennessee. I think this game could mean a little bit more to Vanderbilt tomorrow because South Carolina's goals and expectations are a lot gone at this point.
Yeah, and South Carolina has one more win than Vanderbilt right now, but you can argue that their season's been even more of a disappointment than Vandy's, to be honest with you, in terms of expectations of where they were supposed to be. And so, we felt that last year when we rolled into Lexington. You could feel it in warm-ups. There's just not a lot of juice in their side. It's also an 11 o'clock kick. And like I said, I don't think Williams-Brice is going to be, platinum in what it usually is. And I've played there at night twice, and it's one of my favorite places to play in this conference. But an 11 a.m. kick against Vanderbilt after last week's home performance that was not great, I think that edge wears off a little bit against the doors. And so, Xavier Legette is an unbelievable talent. As much as South Carolina can, I'm getting him the ball, especially against Vandy's secondary. But some interesting things could happen, and it may not be the best game of the weekend to watch or the prettiest game, but it could be it could be one that comes down to the wire.
I want to ask you. I don't think you're going to be in the stadium for that one tomorrow, but if you were, and you just watch the teams go through warm-ups, what's the chance that you could predict the winner just based on watching that?
Maybe it's hard because people know because they're in the stands, especially now with all the TV stuff. Dude, you are out. It's like a 4-hour game. I mean, you are out there forever. And real talk, when I was a freshman and a sophomore and I wasn't seeing the field yet and I was still developing, I'd be sore after the game from standing for 4 hours. Like that, it is a long time. And so, long story short, there's some time to make adjustments. There's some time to turn it around. But absolutely. So last year we come out against Kentucky, and Kentucky didn't even walk out for warm-ups. It was below freezing. It was sleeting. It was snowing. And they just thought, hey, you know what? We'll stay inside and we'll stretch in here or whatever they did. I'm not really sure. But long story short, they didn't come out for warm-ups till 20 minutes before kick and kind of did their team stuff, and then they were ready to go. But all the pregame stuff, the wait staff out there, the routes on air without any pads on, there was none of that stuff for Kentucky last year. And so we sensed that, and we hopped on them early. And it was a dogfight to the end, but we found a way to score late and win that one. So you can tell a team's energy for sure on the other side of the 50 when they're warming up. But to say you can predict a win and loss, there's a lot of stuff that can happen, a lot of time between now and then.
All right. Also at 11, this one on ESPN, speaking of Kentucky, it will host the Alabama Crimson Tide. And your bold prediction here, Bama hangover leads to a closer first half than some expected. Milroe explodes in the second, has 200-plus rushing yards. My goodness.
200-plus.
He had, what, $157 a week ago?
I'm not saying he's going to have all 200 in the second half. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that the way, first off, an unbelievable win last week of huge momentum. I had friends in the stands. I have buddies who played for both Alabama and LSU, and they said it's the most fiery they've seen Bryant Denny in a long, long time. And that's saying something. And you know what? It probably attests to, and this is happening at Georgia a little bit too, y'all. I've had people say at Georgia, like I said, Georgia hasn't lost in 5 years. Maybe people are getting a little complacent. And there was talks of Georgia getting booed last week because they were in a tight game with Missouri and weren't pulling away. And so that happens. And so now, you look at Alabama, they suffered that home loss and now they're resurging back. And that fan base is now acting like they're almost like a little bit of an underdog, to be honest with you. And that's crazy that I'm even talking about this. But the energy in Bryant Denny last week, how that resurged the Alabama program, it's easy to have a hangover, especially at 11 a.m. on the road at a team that you're really, really supposed to win. I think they have a little bit of I'm not saying they're going to trail or be down by 10 or anything like that or really be on upset alert, but definitely a closer game than we expect in the first half. But Jalen Milroe, has turned what he was at the beginning of the season was an inexperienced, probably a little bit underdeveloped quarterback who didn't have a lot of experience and snaps under his belt. Okay, he's a playmaker and a game breaker now with his legs. And we talked about Tommy Rees trying to shorten the menu for him. They haven't really shortened it. They've just changed it with a bunch of quarterback run stuff. The way that he's been able to see defenses. I remember his touchdown last week where he scrambled and was able to the corner kind of running towards and then putting his foot in the ground and accelerating towards the end zone. Milroe's a game breaker. And more than anyone in this conference has developed into an unbelievable playmaker. 200-plus rushing yards on the stat sheet in that box score after the game. And Alabama gets it done in Lexington.
Yeah. Remember the 3 weeks before he had rushed for negative yardage, but it did feel like they maybe found something. I was trying to look up Kentucky and see how it had done against mobile quarterbacks. I guess it's played a couple. Well, Brady Cook's got some mobility. Joe Milton has mobility for sure. Mike Wright has a lot of mobility, and I think they went to their third string freshman in that one last week against the Cats. So yeah, I don't know that any of those guys have had field days, but I don't know that any of those guys are
they're not
Jalen Milroe either. I mean, Mike Wright is, but with Milroe, there's a little bit more threat of a pass to offset that.
And what makes it so dangerous is, look, I'm not saying, and he can, but Milroe's strength as a passer is not threading the needle through the middle of zone defenses. Yeah. It's going over the top. He throws the best deep ball in this conference. And so when you have to play 30 yards deep and to respect the post, respect the goes, and he can scramble for 15, 20 in chunks and is really, really good at it, that stuff adds up. And it's a nightmare for defensive coordinators. Again, bold prediction for a reason. Probably not going to happen, but definitely very, very possible. 200-plus rushing yards. That's definitely his forte.
Okay, let's move on to Tennessee and Missouri. That's the 2:30 CBS game. Your bold prediction. Tennessee offense finally looks similar to last year after the big week versus Connecticut. Vols put up 50-plus, setting up a huge game in Neyland next week. Now, look, I picked Missouri to win. I think it's almost a toss-up. I went with Missouri at home. But, I mean, you say bold predictions. This one, it's a little bold, but if you look back on history, it's not as bold because, my goodness, Tennessee has put up some points on Missouri the last 2 years.
They've torched them. They've absolutely torched them. And I don't want to call this what I'm going to say because I don't mean no disrespect to UConn. But Tennessee finally, we've talked about how they've been inconsistent and just haven't looked the same as last year. And look, that's not just because Hendon Hooker's gone. It's because he's gone. It's because their top 10 tackle is gone. It's because the best receiver in the country, Jalen Hyatt, is gone. Their offensive coordinator is gone. It's a whole new offense. But it's still at the top, Josh Heupel's, scheme and whatnot. And they finally get that under their belt against basically a bye week and what it was almost a scrimmage game against UConn last week. Look, they got a lot of help from their defense scoring some points last week with 2 touchdowns. But finally, Tennessee looks at least a little bit like the DNA that it did last week or last year, excuse me. And so Vols are going to put up some points here. And it's all about if Missouri can keep up. I know there were some questions about the health of Luther Burden earlier in the week. I don't have the update on that, Chris. Maybe you do. But that's going to be a huge storyline because I truly believe that the storyline of this game is that Missouri is going to have to keep up. And if they can, which they've proven, through there's been spurts and flashes of it this year, this is going to be a track meet. But if not, I think Tennessee is really going to score a bunch of points in this game and take it.
Yeah, I needed to look that up. Tennessee got 66 last year and 62 the year before. Now, I think this Missouri defense definitely under Blake Baker better than the one 2 years ago when he wasn't there. They were a disaster. He made them better last year. Tennessee still scored a bunch of points. And look, two differences. They were in Knoxville, A,
Right.
and B, Hendon Hooker to Joe Milton has been a pretty significant drop off.
Yes.
Milton's not been bad by any stretch, but it just Hendon Hooker, in my mind, if you could have stopped the season, before the South Carolina game where he gets hurt, I could have pretty easily justified him winning the Heisman. That's how good he was. I don't know. There's some mixed signals on this game to me.
I think there's some mixed signals, which makes it so intriguing, right? Because if we all knew the script and what was going to happen, it wouldn't be as interesting or as intriguing, man. This is another game I feel like every week we talk about, man, what a momentum changer this could be for Missouri, right? How this could catapult them forward. Last week they found a way to drop that game in Athens, but I came in here on Monday and said, look, no moral victories, but Missouri, the future of Missouri football is big time. They matched Georgia's physicality. They really took them down to the wire. It took a defensive lineman to pick them off to really seal the game there in the fourth quarter. And so they've been able to prove they can play with anybody in this conference. It's just now time to beat them. They played with LSU. They played with Georgia, found ways to lose both those games. And now they got to fight away at Tennessee, who's really, really had their number the past 2 years.
All right, next up is going to be Auburn and Arkansas. Before we go there, a reminder, our channel is presented by a number of people, one of which is myperfectfranchise.net. If you are sick of working for someone else and looking for a better life that you can live on your terms, the guy who can help you understand the risks and rewards of that, my friend Andy Ludicky at myperfectfranchise.net. He will help you find the perfect franchise based on your goals, your dreams, your skills, and your financial requirements. In other words, your personalized American dream. He will educate you on the process, work with you every step of the way. There is no obligation. His services are free. That includes the free questionnaire, which you fill out to get started. Andy spends his time very diligently getting to know you and what you want from life. And he matches that with the company that helps you meet those aspirations. And he's not doing it in a way to just put you with one that gets him paid more over here than he does over there. He is really looking out for you. Call him 404-973-9901. Talk to Andy. Tell him you heard about him on our show and get along with the better life. Auburn at Arkansas. That game, 3 Central on the SEC Network. Both teams get wins a week ago on the road. Auburn at Vandy, Arkansas at Florida. Your bold prediction for this one, finally some momentum for Arkansas. Rocket Sanders and KJ Jefferson have huge days as Arkansas wins by 10+. Now, the 10+ is bold. I don't think Arkansas is winning, but look, if I knew right now, was that a one-off fluke, just right, courtesy of shedding Dan Enos from the staff and replacing him, or is it something else? And I think you've taken your stand with this one.
I have taken my stand with this one, and I've said this so many times, dating back to Chris when I was first on here for the single-digit number of times in the preseason. College football is all about momentum. It's all about momentum, and it's when you play people in the season. Arkansas was as desperate as anyone in this country. Not only did they go and win in Florida, but they win in exciting fashion, rejuvenating the locker room. That's a huge deal. And not only that, but the two guys that won that game are the two guys that they thought were going to win them a bunch of games this year. And that's KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders. I'm watching this game, Chris, against Florida last week. And they need a touchdown to win and a field goal to tie because Florida just kicked a field goal to start overtime. The first play for Arkansas of overtime, they get backed up 10 yards. It's 1st and 20. 1st and 20, that's not how you want to start. So you're already basically out of field goal range, so you got to gain some. And then the first snap, KJ Jefferson scrambles and runs somebody over for a first down on 1st and 20. Next play, handoff to Rocket Sanders, bounces off a couple tackles down to the 5. Next play, touchdown. Those guys are who Arkansas has wanted to lean on all year. They finally get momentum as a team. The players show up, and I think those guys really, really continue their momentum. And it's all about momentum in college football and confidence. Those two guys got it. That team has it, and Arkansas finally starts building those things that we talked about. We looked back and said about this Arkansas and Florida game, Chris, man, if they can win this one, who knows, maybe where they'll end up. Okay, well, here we are. And I do believe that Arkansas will continue to get that ball rolling.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because Arkansas, I mean, hey, we've all waited for this team to play to the level that we expected. And again, injuries and Daniels had a lot to do with that. But we saw a glimpse last week of a team that was bought in, and I'm interested to see how that one goes. Okay, next in order of kickoff, we've got the most anticipated game of the week as Ole Miss visits Georgia's roughly a 10-point underdog.
Yep.
Your bold prediction for that one. Let me find it here.
I can say it too.
Oh, I got it. Lane Kiffin and crew start fast, build an early lead. Georgia depth shows in the end as the Dogs escape by a late touchdown, a Carson Beck legacy win.
So here's the thing with Carson Beck, and I'm going to work backwards on this. First off, Lane Kiffin is probably, and I would say Lincoln Riley, but man, is that falling off the tracks, is so creative and so innovative within his offense. It blows me away. It really does. And what I've seen him be able to do, and especially with now how I know how close, him and Kirby are, he's going to have stuff that he wants to put on him early. And I'm not saying it's going to be trick plays and flea flickers, this and that, but Kiffin is smart enough with his X's and O's that he's going to have one or two stuff that he knows is going to hit early. And look, Georgia's staff is good enough between Kirby and even Muschamp on there now. There's enough defensive minds and firepower over there. They're going to adjust. But I think Kiffin and Ole Miss start out strong. I'm not saying they're going to get up by 14 or any of that stuff, but maybe a 7-3, 10-3 lead. I really think that's possible, especially, with the way they played. They started that way against A&M last week, but basically lost the fight in the middle of that game and then found a way to win it there at the end. The reason I start with this Carson Beck thing is because we started at the beginning of the season, and just like Jalen Milroe was an inexperienced, not necessarily young, but inexperienced, didn't have a lot of snaps under his belt, and looked a little fragile. He grew up a ton in that game in Jordan-Hare against Auburn when their backs were against the wall, 10-0. They came back and found a way to win it. Now, look, he had that guy, Brock Bowers. I heard somewhere that he's back running. Is that right? Did I hear that?
I think he's getting close, yeah.
And look, but at the same time, Beck hasn't really – maybe he's dropped off a bit, but he's thrown for 600 yards and 4 touchdowns with no picks without Bowers. And so he's found ways to still be productive through Levet and other guys as well without him. And so, you're going to have – you haven't lost a game since before COVID. You've won 26 games in a row as a program, back-to-back national champions, and your back's against the wall down at home. Carson Beck's going to lead him out of it. And look, Stetson Bennett, back-to-back MVP of the national championship game. Ginormous, maybe impossible shoes to fill. But I think this is the game where he really, really starts to step into those shoes and creates a legacy for himself.
It's interesting. I was at the gym yesterday and watching whatever was on Fox, and they did the ticker for the Heisman odds, and I wasn't locked in, but I think Beck was 7th or 8th at this point. And it occurs to me as we're doing this, okay, his big games are to come. I mean, they've had some nice wins, Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, but I mean, they got Ole Miss and at Tennessee coming up. These are times where if Michael Penix or somebody slips, and Georgia wins big, and he's got a lot to do with that, which certainly he would. I'm interested to see what the next 2 weeks does to his name in the Heisman conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And look, if I were a betting man, do I think Carson Beck's going to win the Heisman? No, I don't. But we've seen so many times in the past, in order to win the Heisman and really win over those voters, those Heisman moments, right? The moments where you lead your team. I believe that this is going to be an opportunity. I really do. I think Georgia's back's going to be against the wall. They've shown already a lot of times this year that they're not exactly the same consistent team, especially at the very beginning of games. Ole Miss can jump on you fast with their offense. And I think Carson Beck leads them out of it. And, man, he starts to step into those shoes that are so big, maybe impossible to fill with Stetson Bennett, and really starts to create a legacy for himself. Because that guy right now is uber confident, absolutely slices and dices defenses. And I think that's exactly what he's going to do in the second half. Georgia's going to be a tight one. It's going to be a great game in Athens. I'm really excited for this one. But Carson Beck is going to be the story here.
Yeah, you made a great point there. It's all about winning those games in front of everybody. There's 2 huge games this weekend. This one in Penn State and Michigan, which also has a quarterback in McCarthy who's in the hunt. So, yes, this is a phenomenal opportunity. Primetime game, 6 o'clock. Yeah, I'm interested to see if the narrative does change. I mean, narrative, he's in the narrative, but I'm interested to see if that gets amplified based
Absolutely.
on what he does. So,
Absolutely.
okay, next up, the Florida Gators. And hey, since we're at Florida, shout out to Chomps, my go-to snack after a workout, halftime, whenever. 9 flavors, something for everybody. Start with a trial pack that has 6 different flavors, all 3 proteins, 9 to 10 grams of protein, and 60 to 100 calories per stick. Whole30, keto, certified paleo, gluten-free, free of the top 9 allergens, no hidden harmful ingredients. Excuse me. Give Chomps a try today. Promo code at the bottom. It's a better snack than I am a narrator at the moment. So in any case, give it a try, and I think you'll like it. All right, next up, we have the Gators traveling to LSU in a very interesting game. Both teams had big letdowns last week, and LSU's got its dreams are gone. Not going to make the playoff.
Yep.
I guess Florida's dream at this point is to get to 500, and that's not going to happen without a win at LSU, or might not. In any case, here's what you said, and this is interesting. Florida culture is going to show in this one, good or bad. LSU doesn't lose at home, especially at night. Party in Baton Rouge as they win by 14.
So first off, let me say this. So Chris, you mentioned earlier about how last year when I was playing at Vandy, we obviously beat Florida at home, and I scored a go-ahead touchdown in that game. And speaking of chomps, I did not hit the Florida Gator chomp, and it's one of my biggest regrets as a player. And so anytime you do the chomps ad, I feel like I have to do it to make up for lost time. But apologize to all our Florida viewers, but it is probably my biggest regret in my playing career. Anyway, look, here's the deal with Florida is I feel like so many times this year it was Utah and we're out on Florida. And it was Kentucky and we're out on Florida. It was Utah and then we're in on Florida because they beat Tennessee. And they get smoked by, and so it's been so much in and out. And so especially now, because I think more than any loss this year so far, this past week's to Arkansas, 2-win Arkansas team at home is probably the most demoralizing. And so long story short, with all this in and out on Florida, I'm not sold on Florida. I think the general media is not sold on Florida. I'm not even sure if the players inside the locker room know exactly what their identity and their culture is, but I think we're really going to find out. We're really going to find out this weekend because I said a lot of the preseason, it was a red flag for me that, Florida with the guys they had last year, look, that were they less talented? Maybe so. It was Napier's first year. But that was alarming to me when they played in that bowl game and got beat by 30 to Oregon State. And I know Oregon State's a good team, but by 30 to Oregon State.
Well, they also had half the team out too, if I recall.
But
I don't know that it was really Florida.
My point is the bowl game. I truly believe, and team obviously now with guys opting out and this and that, you find, in my opinion, and I've experienced this with myself. I have buddies who play all across the country at teams. People either get really excited for bowl games, or players can't wait for Christmas or New Year's, and they don't care at all. And to me, that's what I saw last year with this Florida team. And so does this same thing happen in Baton Rouge? LSU does not lose a lot at home. It's maybe the toughest place to play in the SEC when the lights are on, right? And I'm hearing Jaden Daniels is going to play. He's healthy back. It's just going to be – I just don't understand how you can have any confidence in this Florida team, especially after last week's performance and the roller coaster of a season they've been. But also with that roller coaster, who knows? They may come out and look like an unbelievable team, right? Like I have no clue here. That's why I said I think Florida's culture and what Napier is building is going to show and be exposed, good or bad, way more in this game than any other one.
Yeah, and to be fair about that one, they did have I think they had a lot of players out. I think they kicked Brenton Cox off the team by that time. And I believe Richardson didn't play to get ready for the draft. And in that case, their drop off to the next guy, I don't even remember if it was Jack Miller or who it was enormous. So that was kind of a point with the bullet. It wasn't just missing guys. It was like you lost a dude at quarterback, and the guy that you went to from there was, I mean, look, Florida knew his next quarterback was going to have to be found on the portal from the minute that season was over. So that's I'm not going to say your criticism was harsh, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
by 30. I know they scored a field goal, and then again, I don't know.
It's not the loss because Oregon State's a tremendous program.
Good
Obviously,
team.
They've taken another step forward, getting DJU this past offseason. But the Florida Gators losing to the Florida Gators losing to Oregon State, the Beavers by 30. Come on, that ain't it. That ain't it.
Yeah.
That ain't it.
Were you a trash talker?
You know what's funny, man, is, and I was literally talking to a buddy about this yesterday because there's so much talk that happens on a football field. And as fans and even on TV, you can't see it because, one, you got the helmet. And then if you're there in the game, you're so far back, right? There is so much talk that happens, way more than a basketball game. I mean, you can say one little thing in a basketball game or a gesture, boop, teed up, getting thrown out. The amount of stuff that happens on that football field, y'all, I wish everybody was mic'd up because it's ridiculous. I only talked back when I was talked to. I never necessarily initiated it. Or if I knew, I sometimes I started it if I knew I had a big matchup against a guy I knew who was a trash talker. But we can maybe have another show about that. I do have some stories about some guys specifically, but I also don't want to throw anyone under the bus. So
what's the funniest trash talking story you've got? Do you want to share it now, or do you want to hold that?
Man, I might have to think on that. There's been a few. I just remember for me, and people ask me this all the time. You know, who's the hardest guy you had to block? What's the coolest place you had to play? The hardest guy I ever had to block, and I Will Anderson, all these kind of guys. Yeah. For me, it was N'Kobe Dean at Georgia.
Huh.
I mean, I had a better chance of
running. What were you doing blocking N'Kobe? Well, okay, never mind. That makes sense.
Working the second level, tight ends. Come on, man. We're versatile players, Chris. Come on, man.
Right.
Come on. Yeah, I had a better chance of running through this brick wall than I did blocking that guy. His strength was, and he was like 220 and I was 240, but pound for pound, maybe the best guy. I remember Zach Pascal at Kentucky as well. Sam Williams at Ole Miss. Those were some really, really good players that I had to block. But in terms of trash talking, N'Kobe Dean wasn't afraid to let you hear it, and he definitely backed up as well. So
Sam Williams would have had a few pounds on you.
He had a few pounds on me for sure. Pascal at Kentucky is another one as well. But yeah, Sam Williams, in terms of link, Brenton Cox was another guy too at Florida. Too bad he didn't last, but that guy was basically made in a lab. So he was hard to block.
All right. Let's see what we got left. I think we're down to one, aren't we? Yeah. Mississippi State at Texas A&M. Probably a game that neither fan base is super excited about. Although, look, for Mississippi State, that's the one team that does have some goals intact. To get to a bowl would be a decent season. A&M, I don't know how you – I guess if you went out, you go 7-4, it's a decent season, but that's about all they got at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your comment. Bulldogs are a mess right now. A&M is desperate. Max Johnson has a huge day, throwing for 300+. Plus Anais Smith with 2 touchdowns. Now, if I'm going to critique your prediction,
okay, please.
You said bold predictions. I think this is more of probably a predictable game script than a bold. But to be fair, I can't pick much bold with Mississippi State without being ridiculous, especially as it pertains to that offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I say this, I feel like I say this every show, like a broken record, but I do have some sympathy there because obviously what happened with Mike Leach. I just think that there's a total identity crisis on Starkville because they went from being, like I said, I thought Mississippi State, I thought yards, points, especially through the air, that's non-existent now. And not only that, but their pass defense. I mean, we saw a non-existent Peyton Thorne and an Auburn passing attack, look like the air raid versus Mississippi State in itself a few weeks back. And so, teams have been teeing off, throwing the ball against Mississippi State. And, Max Johnson, I think no matter what happens with Jimbo next year or whatever, he's got stuff to prove as well, being the backup at the start of the year behind Wegman. And I've found, A&M is dangerous and explosive when they get Anais Smith the ball, whether that's on punt returns, whether that's on offense. We saw it against the Gamecocks. He made an unbelievable play down the sideline, scoring in the middle of the field. We saw it some against, I believe it was Alabama too. If I'm Max Johnson, I'm throwing that dude the ball as much as I can, and I think he will. 300+ for Jackson against a weak secondary and Mississippi State, and Anais Smith counts for 2 of those touchdowns.
Yeah, big game for Zach Arnett. A lot of hot seat talk around that guy.
Yep.
Wouldn't want to be the loser of this one, especially if your name is Jimbo. Well, I mean, the same thing with Arnett. I mean, there's again with all the talk that he might be gone. This is one that's just going to make it tougher.
Here's a bold prediction right here. Here's a bold prediction. Sorry to interrupt you, Chris.
Sure.
If A&M loses this game, Jimbo Fisher's fired by Monday morning.
Ooh, you might be right.
That's my prediction right there.
I mean,
but I think A&M's going to win. But if A&M loses, I think Jimbo is in Thailand or wherever Cliff Kingsbury went by Tuesday morning. So,
the timing on that wouldn't be bad because you got Abilene Christian next week, and then you got a game at LSU. It gives you a chance.
yep.
I would presume Bobby Petrino would be the interim there if they were to make a move.
And that would be a story when it's in itself, right?
Oh my goodness, I'm here for that.
That would be a story within itself. But we'll see what happens. And look, I don't even want to start thinking about who's next until it happens. I think that's a little bit disrespectful, to be honest with you. But there's a lot of guys out there right now that, in my opinion, would be a pretty good fit in College Station.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back at it tomorrow with some more previews of the weekend. Emphasis will probably be on Georgia and Ole Miss since that's the biggest one. We really haven't broken that one down in depth this week other than our preview videos, which you can find on our channel. We do those every week. So we'll hit it maybe from a different angle tomorrow. Anyway, we'll do that. We'll break down some other games. God bless you guys. Have a great day. Thank you for watching Southeastern 14 presented by Bet Online.